What happened during a job interview that made you not want the job? English teacher looking for a position. Second interview went well. Interviewers said they wanted me to be on their team and that they would set up an appointment to sign the contract by the following Monday. I called to check in on Wednesday and was told that I would receive a call by Friday. Called on Friday afternoon and was told that the person responsible would be calling me back that afternoon. The following morning, received a phone call from the principal checking in on whether or not HR had been in touch. He promised to light a fire under them. I started interviewing elsewhere as backup. After 3 weeks of this kind of back and forth, I let them know I had accepted a different position, one which had passed me a contract to sign 10 minutes after the interview. I have had the same experience as well. Their recruiter had told the HR department I was a good catch and I even got an interview at their main headquarters. Afterwards it was the same story as you. I gave up on them. When I had an interview at 8:30, but they didn't call me in until 9:30. I had something similar happen when I was still in college. Went in for a retail position. My interview was at noon. When I showed up 15 minutes early, I was told that the manager was on lunch and wouldn't be back for another hour. I needed the job, so I waited only to have a half-assed interview and be told that they had already hired someone days before. Shady dude was the only person there in literally an empty storefront. Job was for computer repair. We actually sort of hit it off. Got into a long discussion about music production and he actually burned me a couple of CDs of pirated software for my studio. Then he explained that the job was really crappy and I should find something else. Found out later that the whole business was a scam and he embezzled a bunch of money and ran off without paying his employees. Dude must have genuinely liked me so he didn't hire me. Whoa, seems like a pretty good goo. Oh. Did an on-the-job interview with a security locksmith company. Interviewer got a phone call from his boss and they got into a huge argument and he quit right in the middle of the job interview. I just kinda went home and pretended it never happened. Was interviewing for a management position. They said that I first had to work an amount of time as a rep, on a rather low pay. Yeah, don't advertise a management position if it's basically a ploy to get cheap reps. When the interviewer double booked and insisted she interview us together, then proceeded to compare our answers in real time, in front of the other candidate. When she called me 3 weeks later, outside of work hours, to offer me the job, she seemed genuinely surprised at my refusal. Interviewing for a position as an advisor for a financial firm. The manager then gave me the floor for questions. Me, is this a new role or am I replacing someone? Interviewer, well, we had 3 advisors in this department and I laid off 2 of them because I felt we were overstaffed. You would be the replacement. Me, thinking in my head, okay, I think we're done here. I'm pretty sure you can only lay people off if you eliminate their position. Otherwise it's firing. When we got to salary negotiations, and they literally wanted to give me half of what I was expecting. When I was in high school, one of the jobs I interviewed for said I noticed you put minimum wage as your desired salary. However, I got a special permission from the state to pay my high school workers less than minimum wage. I was like, WTF. My interviewer turned out to be a former co-worker from a previous job. Great dude, we always got along. 10 minutes into the interview he leans forward and quietly says, the job's yours if you want it, but you don't want it. Trust me. I did trust him. I thanked him and left. I discovered I was being pitched a job as a life insurance salesman for the purpose of taking old people's money. I felt gross just being there. I suppose, if you put it that way, we are getting our initial site data by violating several US anti-hacking laws. I walked into the interview with no real idea what the job actually was. I walked out of the interview with no real idea what the job actually was. To this day, I still don't know what that job was. Transponster. Walked into a rapid fire panel interview. Took about a half hour of me half-assing my way through questions I didn't know the answer to for the panel to ask me what position I was there for. I was interviewing for a position as a mechanical engineering intern, sophomore in college. They thought I was there to interview for an intermediate electrical engineer position. They apparently hadn't even looked at my resume. Then I was given a tour by a younger employee that informed to me that there are daily 6 AM and 6 PM meetings that you have to be present for or call into if you are taking a vacation day. Oh, and you only get paid for 8 hours a day. They were also the lowest hourly offer of any of the internships I applied for. I told them no. What the heck could be so pressing that management feels the need to hold mandatory meetings twice a day, and at the worst possible times too? WTF. Them. How much overtime are you willing to work? Me. As much as you're willing to pay me for. Them. Well, we don't pay for overtime. Me. You are legally obligated to compensate me for overtime. Them. Well, it won't be much, but are you willing to put in extra hours? What kind of compensation would you be looking for? Me. Cash. And for you to have this system worked out already. I'm out. Engineer 09 grad. Applied to work as an engineer for a coal mine. They took us for an underground tour, essentially making sure nobody freaked out. One of the guys who had been there a long time was leading us, with a bad limp I might add, and said it's not if you will be hurt, but when and how bad. This wasn't very long after a safety meeting talking about a guy crushed himself operating heavy equipment at another site a few days before. Coal mining is a dangerous job. Heck, mining in general. I've had 2 instances where an interviewer talked me right out of wanting the job. 1. I always get a few questions in myself, and I always ask the person who would be my boss, what do you like about your job? One time, my future boss said I don't really like my job and went on to explain why he didn't like being a manager in the company. That was the end of me wanting to be his employee. 2. I interviewed for a sales support position to sell a software product to state governments. During the interview, they admitted that they had no current contract with any state to sell the software, nor any concrete plans to get a contract. I never returned any calls for a second interview. I'm in college, so I was looking for a job while I was home for this summer, and I applied at Target. They called me and asked a few questions. One of them was when I was going back to school. I told them the last week of August, and they said they couldn't hire me because I couldn't work through the first week of September, which is really busy for them. I was somewhat upset, but it wasn't that big of a deal for me. I moved on and applied to a few other places. A few weeks later they called me and said they looked at my application again and they changed their mind and invited me in for an interview. I was excited and I was glad that I had a second chance. I go in and everything in the interview was going well. They finally asked when I was going back to school, which was weird to me because they already asked me that before. I told them the first week of August. Then the interviewer said that they couldn't hire me because I wouldn't be there for the first week of September. I asked why they even called me in and I explained what happened. The interviewer said that she had no idea that they called me before. I was very upset that they wasted my time like that. I've had multiple places blatantly lie about their compensation and benefits up until the actual interview. Last time I was job searching, I think I walked out on 3 places. Went in for what seemed to be a legit sales job. Quickly realized it was a pyramid scheme. I'm idiot. They told me that I couldn't use the bathroom whenever I wanted and most people end up with incontinence. And most people end up with incontinence. What in the absolute frick? I'm an accountant. I walked into this company for a job interview and knew something was off. It was on the 40th floor in downtown San Francisco. Had like 6 offices. Had 2 corner offices. Had a section of the office had 10 cubicles. Had a boardroom that can seat 14. Unfortunately had no employees. Just like 4. The president was an expert in his field at one time. Now he's old and should have been in a nursing home. He had 3 secretaries. These people were supposed to be servicing over 300 clients' money. How? Something was fishy as frick. Turned out later I learned from someone that he was stealing money to finance his lifestyle, which at one point was extravagant, but he was at the tail end of his scam. He was borrowing money to keep it up. He was being investigated by the IRS. Someone blew the whistle, but IRS never followed up until someone reported him because he was essentially running a money management firm without a license. Then it all came down. By then, he was so old he couldn't stand trial. His secretaries pleaded we didn't know and been bleeding him dry by making him sign random stuff. He died one day. It was sad. He got away with everything. Stealing from people who most likely were stealing money from someone. May it be shady sources of money to ripping off the taxpayer. I did dodge a bullet. Thief sets up scheme to steal money. Has stolen money subsequently stolen by pretty young women. Seems legit. They made a big reassurement that what they did in the business wasn't illegal. My interviewer today said, "This isn't a pyramid scheme. If you have to say it isn't a pyramid scheme, then it's a pyramid scheme." After college, I was desperate for a job and threw my resume everywhere. I got a call for a company and I thought it was a graphic design position. I majored in history but had a knack for graphic design, so I was amazed I got a call. Well, I got there and was immediately told it was a Christian telemarketing company and I'd be a telemarketer making commission. I said the position was clearly for graphic design and the woman told me it was to draw potentially talented candidates in. They showed me a list of all the charities they telemarket for and I recognized none of them. They weren't religious either. They wouldn't let me take home anything that said charity names on them. But I memorized a few and couldn't find anything about these charities when I looked them up at home. I tried to be as polite as possible through the 2-hour ordeal, which had me shadowing a telemarketer who told me that elderly people were the best to get money out of. I have absolutely no idea why they kept pitching they were a Christian company when what they were doing was so unbiblical, but I digress. It's been 5 years since I interviewed there. I happened to go by the building a few months ago and it's now a medical center. I wonder what happened. Hopefully someone caught onto their shady shenanigans and reported them. I prepared for an interview a few weeks ago, worked on what to say for a couple of days and as usual got pretty worked up and nervous beforehand. I go to the interview where the guy sits me down and tells me this is nothing more than just a quick informal chat, and here's me in a full suit sweating my butt off having prepared 100 questions answers in my head. He then proceeds to say that I'm not suitable for the job I have applied for. He thinks I'm overqualified, but he is thinking about creating a different position in the company I can fill. I ask what the position is. He rambles for a good 20 minutes straight, no joke, about me filling a new job, but the job doesn't yet have a training scheme or any kind of official description documentation. He wants me, as part of the job, to create the job's training scheme for the job I'm literally learning to do. I'm sat there confused as heck. He hasn't got any notes with him and is just improvising this entire job description where I, as a fresh graduate, am in charge of 38 people's IT systems on my own with no proper experience. I ask what the pay and hours are. Oh, I haven't even thought about that yet. So I went for an interview that wasn't even a proper interview or related to the job I'd applied for. Such a waste of time. Taking that job is a good way to end up nearly 4 years into your career with no focused experience in any one area and unable to demand higher pay, while also being unable to jump to another company for higher pay either as you have 2 years of experience. Applied for a job in Clearwater, FL. In-person interview was normal enough, got passed through to a secondary interview. At the start of the secondary was asked to take some tests. I think no big deal. Been there done that with other jobs. They hand me a freaking book-sized stack of papers with hundreds of questions. I looked down at the bottom of the sheet and in small print it stated that this test was created based on the concepts of L. Ron Hubbard and printed by the Church of Scientology. I stood up, put the stack back on the lady's desk and noped the frick right out of there. Clearwater, FL. Came in expecting Scientology, left unsurprised. You've had a lot of jobs. Yes, they were temp jobs. But why so many? They were with the same agency. But why do you leave them after a short time? Because they were temporary assignments? I don't understand. How do I know you won't leave here? Because I won't be working here. Goodbye. Thick as ST. I always listed my time with an agency as one job, and individual as assignments as job responsibilities. I had a phone interview with a company that bragged about having an on-site doctor. To me that meant one of two things. 1. It was so stressful to work there they had a doctor on site for liability. 2. If I needed a sick day I would be expected to see that doctor instead of my own. I ended the interview right there. Edit. I'm glad that my fear isn't always the case. For me the overall vibe of the call plus that mention were enough to make me cautious. Checking reviews of people that have worked from them really makes me feel like I made the right choice. My company has an on-site nurse. It is an office building. Her main job is handing out ibuprofen. Oh, we won't be paying you during your probation, which is about 3 months, and this was an entry-level job. 2 months and 27 days later they decide it's not a good fit. Being headhunted from my then current job as a manager in a small but busy and successful cafe to work for this large, posh hotel. They phoned me and said that they had found my stored CV online, which I hadn't removed since finding employment, and that one of their board members had been impressed with me as a customer in the cafe. They offered me an interview and a job with potential to move up etc, and that I'd be starting as the restaurant manager on great pay, benefits etc. It sounded great, and being quite pleased that I had just been headhunted for the first time, I went along to the interview, which was within the restaurant I'd potentially be working. I turn up in my best suit and this guy comes to interview me wearing jeans and a polo shirt. Very shortly into the suspiciously informal interview, the guy says to me, "Look, the job is yours. I can get you a uniform and you can start whenever suits." At this point I'm like, "What do you mean uniform?" And he points out the waiters and waitresses walking about in pinstripe shirts with huge long aprons. I asked what he meant. I was asked to come here because of my managerial experience etc. Guy replies, "Yes, potentially in the near future, but you'd have to start out on the floor first." I thanked him and went home. Told my boss about it and he gave me a raise. When I left that job around a year later, he put an extra £250 cash in with my wages and threw a leaving party in the cafe for me. Told me to invite all my friends and family, and it was a free bar all day and night. Best boss ever. So glad to have worked for him. I applied for the job because someone told me the manager was awesome. During the interview she mentioned that moving to the south was hard on her husband's health, humid air and bad lungs, and that they really missed home. I had a feeling I'd be getting a new boss as soon as I started, and that's almost always a bad thing. I was right. She left 3 months later, and I heard the new boss was heinous. The guy interviewing me kept calling me Frank and he wouldn't stop. If you didn't say, "Well, to be frank, I don't want this job anymore," before you left, frankly, you missed out. I can answer this one. Worked as an announcer at a college radio station for 2 years and then took a year abroad. The radio station had a great reputation on campus because it was one of the harder jobs to land, but because they received so many applications they didn't have much motivation to treat their staff well or pay them well at all, and the quality manager was a complete and absolute B to the student announcers. Never recognized quality work and always hypercritical of them every time they went on air. The only reason they took the abuse was because they didn't know any better. Definitely overworked and underpaid. Some of the girl employees would cry regularly. Well, I got back from my year abroad and I had an email waiting for me saying they would love to have me back and if I wanted the job to come by and say so. I thought I'll give them a second chance. Showed up and the quality manager greeted me with open arms and was beyond nice to me, asking how my year abroad was, etc. Well, as I answered her, she literally started correcting my word choice, asked me to project better, etc. Then she said I sounded like I had forgotten all my training and would have to go through it again and get paid a base pay rather than the pay I had when I left. This was all because I hadn't gone into radio etiquette during a casual conversation. I smiled and said sure and asked if Scott, the general manager, was around. She pages his office as we continue talking, and when he gets there I shake his hand and talk casually with him for a while so he knows I'm not just in a bad mood, and then I plainly said with her standing right there, "And while I would love to come back to this job and work for you again, I would rather die than work under this soul-sucking employee you've put as quality manager. The reason you have a problem retaining trained employees is her and her alone. If there is anything you want to do to help this station, it would be to replace her immediately." Then I bid him a wonderful day, shook his hand, and left. I got a call the next day from the quality manager apologizing if she was too harsh, that she understood my feelings from the day before and she offered me the job at the same pay as I had before I left. But I politely declined and said all the money in the world couldn't make it worth working under her. First time I stood up for myself in a work environment and last time I was ever disrespected. Respect. Interviewed for a faculty position at a prestigious university on the East Coast and was supposed to interview with the department chair. I had to wait outside his office because my interview was delayed by 15 minutes while he ripped apart this other professor over some billing issues. When I finally walked in, he asked who I was and then why I wanted a job in his department. I should have stood up and walked out at that point, but figured I'd be polite and finish up the afternoon. Went out that night and had a nice dinner and got drunk by myself on their tab. I ultimately got the job offer but turned it down. Was out of work. This was during a phone screen. Me. I'm sorry that salary is significantly less than what I was making previously. Her. Laughing, well, it is more than you are making now, so dodge a bullet there. Applied to a bartending position at a new club, the guy's second club. Strike 1, when he said it was an unpaid position, just whatever tips were made. Strike 2, he told me that the bartenders at his other club had done the dance from Coyote Ugly to earn the bar more money. He asked me what lengths I was willing to go to drive sales. A third strike was unnecessary. Just happened yesterday. We want someone who can be committed to this job for a year or longer. It is part-time and you will get hours as we have demand. You can eventually get full-time. We just had someone who has been here for 3 years become full-time. WTF. You want me to commit to you but you will not commit to me? I was also told they are in dire need to fill this position. I should be receiving an offer today. I was also told they are in dire need to fill this position. You should definitely respond with a statement about if they're in such a dire need to fill the position, they can give you full-time. All went well until the male interviewer turned around and asked me, kinda hoping kids aren't on the cards for you. I'm sick of you girls pulling maternity crap. I believe in the biz they call those guys walking HR liabilities. In welding jobs, you do a job interview, then take a welding skills test. I was taking the test and current employees came up periodically, introduced themselves to me, talked to me a little. They all said pretty much the same thing. It's a crap show in there. I was skeptical at first but I witnessed a father and son get into a superheated argument during my test. I packed up my tools and thanked the owner for the opportunity and explained why I was declining the job and left. I went to an interview for a machinist position in a machine shop. I am a journeyman machinist. The guy didn't expect a lady machinist as someone else had called me to come and interview. He asked if I'd like to sell dietary supplements with his wife instead. WTF, I'm new. First job interview out of college and it was for an account manager job that clearly said it was an office job where you make some cold calls, keep customer happy, etc. Show up in a suit and tie and as I'm sitting in the lobby another guy shows up interviewing for the job as well. The lady then decided to take us to Panera and interviews both of us at the same time. She then starts going on about the job saying it's best to wear shorts and comfortable shoes since we will be going door to door 6 days a week, 8 AM to 8 PM trying to get people to switch their gas and electric provider. After she said that I kind of tuned out and stopped caring what she said. As soon as we got back to the office parking lot she wanted us to come in and explain how after all this work we can end up being district managers making 80k and all this other bull crap. I instead said no thank you, went to my car and drove off depressed that I fell for that scam. It was doing a corporate, behind the scenes kind of role for a shoe company. I wore their shoes. I had some in the back of my closet, and a corporate looking simple black dress and black jacket. This is important to note for later. I didn't look offensive. I looked respectable for the role I was applying to, and the outfit showed their shoes. So I get into my interview. It's with a brother and a sister who control the brand since their granddad passed it down to them. We go through the normal questions. I pull up some numbers and campaigns they've run and discuss it with them as well as a vision for their future. Then out of nowhere, the brother says, "But you're not a fashionista." He practically spits out the last word. I'm really taken aback, because I don't need to be in the role I applied for. You don't have a fashion blog. How can you understand fashion? And then he goes on a mini rant about how can I possibly understand their brand. I knew it had tanked at this point, and it wasn't an industry I normally work in, so I took a risk and decided to burn future bridges. I took one of my pumps off and waved it in there. "What is this thing?" I said dramatically. "Does it belong on my feet? I don't understand. Is its feet clothes?" His sister tried de-escalating the situation at that point, but it was done. I have never, ever done anything like that. Lots of other interviews have passed me where we both knew it wasn't the right fit, but we've always gone through the motions. I checked in a few months later. They promoted one of their shoe designers to the role. The brand is not doing well. Graduated college with a teaching degree and a bunch of video production experience, shot college events, cut them into presentations and posterity videos, ran the college television station, etc. Interviewed with my state teachers union association. They posted an ad in the paper looking for someone to cover their events, drive to the Capitol, film the event, interview attendees, bring the footage back, cut it into 3 different videos, one for internal use, one for TV and one for the website. Also write articles for the website about said event. 3-5 days a week job, 7 hours a day, most weekends. Oh, and the Capitol is at least an hour and a half drive from here. This interview goes on for an hour. Finally it's question time. I asked if there would be benefits. She laughed. I asked about salary. She stifles a laugh. Then she says, "We were thinking 300. That number rolls around my head. There's no way she said 300. 300? That's right. A week? That triggered the laugh. No, maybe 300 a month? Will you cover expenses? Driving, hotels, editing equipment, filming equipment? We figured you'd bring that stuff from home." I stood up, looked her dead in the face and said, "You have wasted an hour of my time." I walked out to the sounds of her hemming and hawing about maybe bumping it up to 350. I should have known better, but it was one of those door-to-door lawn cutting and window washing summer jobs, where there's a recruiter that kind of just hangs around universities looking for people to sign up. The job is marketed as manage a small group of workers, set your own hours, own your own section of the city, make up to $16,000 this summer, no door-to-door sales, great managerial experience, etc. etc. I was just like frick it, let's just see where this goes. Right as soon as I started the interview, the guy gave me a pamphlet with random stats about the company and said read over this for a few minutes, then we'll do a mock scenario. I read it over and go okay, I've read it over, and he goes, okay, pretend I'm a customer who just opened their door and you need to convince me that I want your window washing service. Go. So I start panicking, fumbling the pamphlet, just reading off random stats. He then whispers make the sale, and I'm just like, so choose us to wash your windows. He goes, okay, looks like you've got the job. And then he gave me this giant contract. I brought it home, showed my dad, and he was like, yeah, this is complete balls and robbery. It says right here if you're 1 minute late to work, you owe the company $80. You need your own transport. It's definitely a door-to-door sales. No guaranteed pay, no overtime pay, no guaranteed employees. You have to buy your own supplies. This is like a really bad pyramid scheme. The guy called my house asking if I was still interested, and my dad just grabbed the phone and reamed him out preying on college students, fake promises, no website, no portfolio of work, bull's contract, stop harassing my son lol. I was a dumbass, but yeah, when he said in the interview I had the job, I was honestly like, what? Really? I was wearing a suit, but forgot to wear dress shoes. I was wearing skate shoes Lamfeo. This is the answer I was looking for. Almost fell for one myself. L didn't actually even get the job. Guess I was lucky, but it's awful to think of the kids that do get sucked in. That whole $80 for 1 minute late thing is beyond infuriating. When a few years ago, the interviewer asked repeatedly when exactly I was going to turn 18. Really sealed the deal when 20 minutes after I left he called again, just to confirm exactly when I would turn 18. Went in for what I thought was a low-level IT job with some on-the-job training. Turned out to be an overpriced A+ certification course that essentially gave you a 1-week paid internship at the end so they could justify calling it a job and advertise on job sites. Now I grew up in a small town in nowhere, Montana, so I was prepared for the reality. The job I was applying for was in an extremely isolated area I had never been to before. The interviewer told me straight up it would take years to be accepted into the town. He also asked about what church we would be interested in seeing on the tour. That was when reality set in about what I was stepping into. The job itself was great, but I couldn't put my family into that situation. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.